live on LinkedIn, and still waiting for that YouTube feed. Sending data. Boom. Online, Periscope/Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. My name is Brian Ring, and I want to welcome everybody to this very quick stream. This is a live stream taking advantage of my LinkedIn Live status. I guess that makes me officially an influencer. So this is a multi-stream going to LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And I'm here to promote my panel, which is on the Future of TV, and it's tomorrow at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And I have a very special guest. I have three special guests. One in particular I'm quite happy to join us, and that is John Kosner, who is a four-decade internet pioneer, sports media legend, digital media icon in the world of sports and social TV. And so we're super excited to have John. He spent over 21 years at ESPN and also worked very closely. He worked at the NBA during the Dream Team era. So he is a very special guest, and he recently retired from ESPN. He is investing and being a thought leader, and he's as active as anybody that I've seen that's had such an illustrious career. So I am so pleased to have John Kosner on the panel tomorrow. And I'm equally pleased and happy and so grateful to Pat Crakes. You can see him on Twitter at Aquinas82nd. He's also one of the most quoted TV analysts, and that's because he spent 18 years, most of them, I guess, as a top brass at Fox Sports, whose job it was to read the sports TV Nielsen tea leaves and the like, and understand who was viewing what sports content for how long and how valuable those advertisements were that were being delivered in that context, as well as there's nobody sharper to talk about rights. And there's some very interesting developments and articles that have been written in the last week on this topic of the rights negotiations, on whether we're on this last sort of major kind of rights negotiation cycle that sort of has some of the bundled legacy economics involved, and some stories this week that suggest maybe that's not the case. So we're going to dive into some really interesting stuff with respect to the ESPN Major League Baseball rights negotiation ongoing, and get again, not just John Kosner but also Pat Crakes' perspective on it. My third guest, again, super excited to have him, not only a guest but returning guest. His name is Salil Dalvi. He was a 17-year vet driving new business development, technology, and innovation at NBC Universal. And again, many of those years, top brass SVP level. So just a unique opportunity to ask some folks that have done amazing things in their career. And I'm so pleased to have them joining this panel. If you want to join, you've got to sign up. It's a Zoom registration page. The way to get there is to type FutureOfTV.Live into your browser. It'll take you straight to the Zoom registration page. You can find out more about the topics that we'll cover tomorrow there. Although they're somewhat outdated. And in fact, what I want to do today for you guys, just especially for you, is to do a quick preview of what we're going to talk about. I won't hit some of the slides that I think are really fun and interesting, or at least I'll zoom through them very quickly. But look, first topic is going to be the fate of the RSNs. I did a report early last year where I asked a simple question: have you watched the recent your RSN? And I had various named RSNs, and in California I named the California-based RSNs, etc. So again, like a lot of my research, perhaps a bit it is quantitative, but it has a bit of a qualitative angle. You got to interpret it pretty carefully. But I'm really proud of this one, and I think it speaks volumes. Bottom line, the RSNs are in a bit of trouble, as we know. In fact, Sinclair's written down the value of the RSNs that they've acquired for, I think, over $10 billion, and now they've written down $4 billion or so of that. A lot of folks said, look, I never watch my local RSN. And so Sinclair's building out this new portfolio, this new idea, this new brand, and they've just released it this week. So I am going to get Pat Crakes and John Kosner on the record as to how this huge RSN rebrand is going to go. And we will also talk then about sports betting. These guys are laying a lot on the line and talking about sports betting and promoting it. This is from a Wall Street document, an investor presentation. This is a presentation that's been sent into the SEC, and they're saying at maturity the online sports betting plus iGaming gaming gross revenue. So that's actually like online slots and so forth. But they put that number out there, 50 billion, and it's eye-popping, particularly when you look at 2025 estimates of 12 billion. So that's something to get their comment on. Also, a great article this week by Jabari Young. Shout out to him. He's a sports reporter for CNBC. You can follow him on Twitter at Jabari J Young. Again, on this MLB ESPN rights discussion, and we'll tee that up to Pat Crakes, as I said. Hans Vestberg is a guy I'm lucky enough to say I've actually met him 3 times. One of those times, Hans actually presented me with a TV Innovation Award for some innovation work I did at Ericsson on cloud DVR, which takes me full circle to some of the stuff that I do today with respect to innovation and highlights associated with sports. But I just have to say, so he had an earnings call, or I forget, he was on CNBC, I guess. Yeah, they had an earnings call this week, and they announced 2/3 of their free Disney Plus subs converted and re-upped into paying subs, which I found to be quite an astounding number. And I have to just say, I'm hugely biased. I think Hans is just a fantastic talent, but he took hold of this huge company with a lot of operating parts. I could not be more impressed with Verizon, including its sub-segment, you could say, Verizon Media, who's done just a great job jumping on every last cool thing, that's out there, whether that's, a new contribution service from AWS, or, low latency streaming, real-time streaming, watch parties. I mean, everything that's coming around the corner so quickly, Verizon Media Platform has done a pretty good job. So I'm just going to chalk it up to amazing leadership at the very top. I could not say enough good things about Hans Vestberg. By the way, I'm not going to be this long-winded during the panel because the panelists are going to speak. But this is one that I'm going to tee up to Pat Crakes. Why? Because he was on my show in the fall 2021 period. And he did talk very much about this, the idea that a couple of service providers or, other mega plays in the business would essentially own the business model for much of sports. So we're going to see how that plays out, and I can't wait to get Pat's reaction to that. Salil's also been a wise owl when it comes to streaming and streaming wars, and he knows the insides of the content rights negotiations and so forth, having been part of the top team at NBC Universal. I want to ask him about Stroom. I believe it's pronounced Stroom. And they've got a great simple value proposition, which is to simplify streaming, and I find this to be fascinating. So now we've got so much innovation, but all of it trying to throw assets into exclusivity zones so that you have more and more of these walled gardens around where it's actually harder for a customer, a consumer, to float in and around these various walled garden catalogs. So that definitely does pose challenges both on the consumer side for content discovery, which is of course kind of the point, right? Netflix thinks they've got every last genre and niche covered, so why should you go anywhere else? But of course, for content players that are kind of deep in the catalog, call them niche players, they may not be able to get their content featured on the front page. And so it's clear to me that there's some value lost, or some leakage, if you will, that could potentially be exploited by this new model. So I'm very excited to see where it goes. I know Salil has some thoughts about it, and I'll ask him obviously to relay what those are. So that's another interesting play. By the way, a shout out also to Tracy Swedlow, who had Lauren DeVilliers on her panel this morning. So actually just saw her speak, and by the way, she's fantastic. But I did catch her at the end. I mean, she's got a great model. They're all set to go. I did kind of grab this great quote: "We'll be able to help them," meaning the content providers, determine the value of their assets, which I felt was a really interesting point, right? I mean, are these big mega plays in streaming so big that, the small guys actually need that middleman layer to aggregate the power in order to demand things like data? Or, flip side, you could see how that would be interesting, for someone to help them, value their assets at the same time that there's basically representing those assets. So that's kind of an interesting challenge. I also saw this in Bloomberg Business Week. I wrote a 2021 predictions piece. I hope you guys saw it. If you didn't, please let me know, email you. I'd love to send you that piece. I predicted a bunch of things in 2021, and then we'll see how we did. Well, Business Week did this. They predicted, every year they do it. They predicted what would happen in 2020. And this last week there was the issue of were we right or were we wrong? And in the we were right column, they said there would be only room for one or two winners in the streaming wars, in addition to Amazon, Hulu, and Netflix, which just leaves me feeling like that's just calling the game a bit too soon. It's also a bit of a dig at HBO and Peacock, Paramount Plus, and other players that are really just getting started and trying to figure out, what their true game was. I mean, Jason Kyler, I believe is his name. I admire him tremendously. AT&T's fumbled the ball for years. I could see him coming out, continuing to make great changes, and that could change the calculus of this game. And likewise for Peacock and certainly Paramount Plus has some innovators inside that are ready to break down the doors and do some interesting things. If you didn't catch it this morning, I've written a piece in Fierce, a column, and it is about the QR code. So my survey this time was about the QR code, and we're going to ask this question. So this is not data over here on the right-hand side of the page. It's just to let users know during the webinar tomorrow, we're going to do a live interactive session, and everyone will be able to guess, and we'll see what that comes out to. Hopefully you didn't see that. I was supposed to pass that one very quickly. And that's really it. I mean, I have a few other slides that just show people what's in these reports and why they should sign up. If you're a vendor or even a network or a streamer that's looking at doing technical evaluations of products, or looking to have an understanding of what they should be looking for in the products that they're building or buying, or again, if you're a vendor selling those products and solutions to networks, broadcasters, studios, and enterprises around the globe, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to have a free consultation and tell you a little more about my business and how I can do some things that'll help you grow. So that's kind of a preview of tomorrow, but I'm going to do one more thing here, which is I'm going to give you a preview of Pat Crakes. He had some great things to say in my last session, and also we'll have here in this clip Salil Dalvi. So let's bring this up and let it go.
Your previous slide, which was interesting, it shows, I think it shows less that Facebook went backwards and more that the fractionalization we see in all media everywhere is now catching up with social media, right? TikTok just sails right in. Your previous slide, which was interesting, it shows, I think it shows less that Facebook went backwards and more that the fractionalization we see in all media everywhere is now catching up with social media, right? TikTok just sails right in here, grabs 16% share, and they did that shrugging their shoulders, right? So it's like the fractionalization is both a problem and an opportunity, right? And that opportunity is you can cut things and do things uniquely for various audiences, and they all do something different. The idea that somehow these platforms are all the same is actually probably not right. They each do something different, right? So that's an advantage. How you increase monetization is the challenge, but I do think there's an opportunity there.
I think the bottom is infinite. That is a change in my view. I used to think that 40-50% penetration is probably the bottom, but at some point the cable operator has to figure out a way to improve the experience of their core offering, with larded up with commercials. It's not a first-rate experience. You obviously have X1 that is unique in that way, but great story in the Wall Street Journal yesterday or in CNBC.com yesterday from Alex Sherman about just the level of ambivalence that cable operators have to that core video offering.
Your previous slide, which was interesting, it shows I think it shows less